I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to tell Sirius that I'd like for them to cut a deal with you. And he said these words to me. He looked at me in my eyes and he said these words to me, and it forever held true. The first thing you notice is how tall Howard is. And he walks in and I stand up and he bumps my fist and we sit down. He sits down across from me. In fact, it ruined my life. Why would I ever sign up for anything that had happened? I am guilty of letting my wife, my best friend. That's not everybody's cup of tea. My moral compass has obviously changed tremendously since then.
Bubba the Love Sponge is on the line. I'm excited. Hello, Bubba.
Hey, Brad, how are you? And hello, St. Louis, and all the 75 zillion people you got on your podcast and your YouTube and all the other various pieces, parts that you got.
Just give me that day when you get the call that Howard 101 is going to be happening. I guess Tim Sabian's probably the guy that you knew. Tell me how this all came about, that you start working on a Howard channel, and what it meant when you heard that this was happening to you.
Well, in actuality, I'd gotten fired in March of 2004 for having the second largest fine. In fact, the big Nipplegate Janet Jackson thing that was started by Fred Upton, the congressman from Michigan, and then subsequently became a big witch hunt into, a television nipple issue ended up being, two of the Howard and I were the two largest casualties. Howard had 31 CBS-backed affiliates. Says it didn't really matter to him. I didn't. I got fired in March of 2004, and I didn't have anything to do. Well, immediately I started talking to Jeremy Coleman from Sirius, and of course Sirius and XM were two different entities back then. And so I started talking to Jeremy Coleman, and I was slated. And I don't know that if Howard knows this or not. I'm sure he does. But I was talking to Jeremy Coleman and Jay Clark, and Jay Clark was the president of programming at the time. And they initially were going to make me. I was going to come in and be the morning guy on Sirius. The job that Howard had. And at that point, things started happening, and it got to be like July, August of 2004. And I think at that point, Howard kind of became a little bit available, or Ross Sapin started talking to somebody on Howard's behalf. And all of a sudden, they stopped talking to me altogether. I almost had my deal done in like July of 2004, and I was going to start in the fall. And all of a sudden, Walter Sabo and Jay Clark and all these guys that I'm talking to get this deal done on Sirius stop. And they're like, I can remember in October of 2004, I got a call from Walter Sabo, and he's like, Bubba, there's been a change in the wind here, and we aren't interested in you being the morning guy anymore. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And then all of a sudden they announced that they just cut a deal with Howard. So at that point, they tell me, well, we're still kind of interested in you, but it would probably only be with Howard's blessing. And, at this point, Howard and I were arch nemesis. Like I'd been syndicated in Hartford, and I talked all this shit about Howard, and, Howard's a pussy, and Howard's not a real man, and I'm a real man. I fucking can drive a truck, and I can run a bulldozer, and I'll kick your ass. Just the standard, radio shit. And, fuck you, Howard. I'm going to write some parody songs about how stupid you are, and, all this kind of, how you look like Big Bird and all this bullshit. And did the same shit that Howard, did, like with John DeBella and all, the standard radio stuff. And at that point, then Brent Hatley, my producer, called up Don Buchwald and said, can we put our name in the hat or something? And in Thanksgiving of that year, Howard summons us to come up to New York. And so Brent Hatley and I flew to New York. It was a week before Thanksgiving. And Howard, we go stay in this hotel. And I'd never been to New York a lot. I'm just some stupid guy from Indiana that to travel around a little bit radio. But I'd never been in New York that many times. And we're staying near Don Buchwald's office. And I had to go and have a kind of a conversation with Howard. And so, listen, all these radio guys can act like you're big, bad, and tough, but Howard Stern is still fucking Howard Stern. Like, you know, even though he was my arch nemesis, every one of us would love to be Howard Stern. Every one of us would love to have his success.
What did you think that was going to be like? Were you worried that
No.
Did you think he was going to be like, what are you, you know, because he could just bring you up and just, you know, maul you and say, get out of here.
You could have just said, listen, you stupid. Look how fat you are. You're so fucking stupid. You think I'd give you a chance? Get the fuck out of here. You know, like, I didn't have any idea. So I go there and I go to Don Buchwald's office, and I go, and the secretary goes, Don, go inside Don's office. He's waiting for you. So I just thought that Howard was going to be in there, you know. And so I go in there, and there's Don, and what a nice man. He's just very calculated and calm and patient, and just, you know, old school. And he's like, hey, you know, tell me a little bit about yourself. And he acts like he genuinely cares, and he's writing some notes down. And so I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, I'm probably not going to meet Howard. You know, Don's going to either tell Howard I'm a weirdo or I'm okay or, you know, whatever. So about 15 minutes, and Don's asking me, you know, where you grow up and, you know, where are you from, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And never mentioned Howard one time. So about 15, 20 minutes go by, and he goes, you know what, now, Bob, I tell you what. I want you to go past my secretary, walk out of my office, go past my secretary, and on the second door on your right-hand side, there's a conference room. I need you to go in there and wait for Howard. And I'm like, oh, fuck. So I go in there, and it's just a regular conference room, but it's really dark, really no lights on or nothing. And about 2 minutes later, here comes Howard. And he walks in, and I can remember like nothing. He had brown construction boots on, like cat, you know, military, which made him even more taller. Because, you know, I think the first thing, I'm 5'11", 5'10". The first thing you notice is how tall Howard is. And he walks in, and I stand up, and he bumps my fist, and we sit down. He sits down across from me, and we start talking like a couple little radio bitches, just all about radio. Hey, you know, when you were at, you know, in Detroit, and, you know, hey, what do you think about, you know, Phil Hendry, and, you know, hey man, remember the old Neil Rogers and Miami, and oh my God, and, you know, Howard, when you did the John DeBella funeral, I was in Philly, and I actually worked for Q102, and I went to the funeral, and we just hit it off like a couple little radio bitches. And we probably talked for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And he got up and said, you know what? I like you. I think you have what I'm looking for. I'm familiar with your career. And he said, now I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to tell Sirius that I'd like for them to cut a deal with you. And he said these words to me. He looked at me in my eyes, and he said these words to me, and it forever held true. He said, don't ask me to ever get involved with your money or your contract or anything. I don't want any part of that. Go cut your best deal, but keep me out of that. I'm going to give him my blessing, and, you know, hopefully you can work out a deal. So at that point, it took another year for me, because, you know, Howard didn't go till 06. So all for 05, you know, I was still, and, you know, they weren't really, I wasn't really a priority. They were building Howard's infrastructure, who they fucking put on an afternoon drive, and a big deal. So I'd call up about every 3 weeks. Hey, you guys ready to cut a deal? No, we're not quite ready. You're going to be the guy, but we're not quite ready. We went clear till like October, November of 05 of me wearing them out. And finally, they just said, okay, you know, and I was kind of like a tic-tac added on. But, that's kind of how, that's my long-winded meeting Howard story, and I'll never forget it. You know how you just don't forget either meetings or people that influenced you, and I'll never forget that meeting and what Howard has done for me. I mean, I was a regional guy at best. You know, I was syndicated throughout. I don't know, I think I had 10 stations one time was my biggest I had. But nothing, you know, I was the next level. I was even a couple levels down. You know, there was Howard, Don, and Mike, you know, and then I'm a couple rungs way below them. And to get his anointment and to get his rub and his blessing, you know, just will forever have changed me.
Did you guys ever have a chance after, somewhere down the line, maybe in a private conversation, or where he did talk about the feud? Because it was small, but he feuded with everybody. He wanted to take over the world. And that's why I like him and Vince McMahon both, because they had this vision. I'm taking over the wrestling world. I'm taking all these territories, and it's going to be mine. And Howard said, I'm taking morning radio, and it's going to be mine. Did you ever have that? Or he probably, I mean, he had that you had one small feud, I remember. It was very small. I remember your name coming up in the 90s. I know Man Cow came up more.
He one time it was, I was in Hartford when I got hurt in Hartford, and I came on there, and it was like a weekend promo, and he was in the Hamptons working out or something. So he could hear the Hartford station from where he was, happened to be for wherever the weekend was. And he was telling Robin, I was listening to this new radio station, this 104 station, because they play kind of the music, and this guy is this Bubba the Love Sponge comes on and says he's going to kick my ass, and then I'm a big tall dumbass, and I think his name's Todd Schwartz or something, and he's a real loser, and he's a real fat ass and stuff like that. And so Howard and I were talking about that, and Howard was like, hey, all that stuff that we said, we're on the same team now. And I'm like, hey, I said, I'm the one that's more humbled. You can say anything you want about me. I talked a lot of shit about you, Howard. You're the guy we're all gunning for. And he just snickered. But yeah, we had that conversation, how we had talked some shit about each other, but it's competition.
So does he become a friend, a mentor? What do you consider him at those times during that early portion? Because now he chose you. I mean, like you said,
we're still very close.
And he could have chose anyone, and I know what you're thinking probably during that year. They're just going to take someone else. This is the radio business. Unless that thing is signed, I'm not getting this job. I understand that. But tell me a little bit about just how this became a friendly relationship, or more of a mentor-mentee thing, or what did you consider it?
Well, it started out, I think it was that very first meeting where we, just bullshitted like a couple little radio girls. And from that point forward, I keep in touch with them. I get a hold of him via email and just say, I still haven't got my deal done. He'd be like, don't worry, it's going to be all right. But I didn't want to bug him too much because, he just doesn't like to be bugged. And I appreciate that. And so after I got signed and stuff, then we were up in New York doing some stuff, and I got to spend some time, me and Brent went to dinner with him and stuff. And, Howard, the one thing about Howard is that once Howard either trusts you or kind of likes you, or you're not showing him that you're not trying to take advantage of him, or you're just a good guy. So he quickly is very approachable, and he's an absolute mega star, but he doesn't give the people that are working for him that vibe. He likes to be left alone. He don't want to be fucked with, but he doesn't. I think he's far more gracious and than people give him credit for. He really, really was gracious to me within, a year of me working for him. And you think about modern day Howard and how he's even more bubbled in and didn't like to go anywhere. He actually came to my wedding in January of 2007, loaded up the plane with a bunch of the boys and came to my wedding. So I am so humbled by the things that Howard did for me and continues to do for me. Him and I keep in touch. I get a birthday card every year from him. I started doing abstract painting, and I sent him one of my paintings just so that he would probably goof on it. But I don't know if he was goofing on it or not. But him and I have stayed in contact, and a lot of people that have defected, Stuttering John and people like that, have talked shit about Howard. You'll never hear me say one bad word about that guy, other than just forever grateful for the opportunity that I got and the rub that he gave me and that I always have.
Yeah, and you would come on his show a bunch. You would call in, you'd be on. But the wedding was obviously, I think, maybe the pinnacle of you being on the show, because it became a whole week. Ronnie was there, and he was kind of being Ronnie. Artie, I guess, was starting his downward spiral.
Yep.
Do you get along with Ronnie? Or do we like Ronnie?
Ronnie and I are, out of everybody, Ronnie and I are the closest.
Because of the driving, I guess, still, right? You guys had a feud for a second, right?
Ronnie's just, Ronnie's a guy's guy, Ronnie's a guy's guy.
And then Artie, I loved Artie. Artie came through town a couple times, got to meet him. He was great. And everybody I have on this podcast, I have to ask, like, do you have a chance? Have you talked to him? And just give us one of your favorite Artie stories. If you have any update, it'd be great if you could. I actually talked to him yesterday.
No, I haven't. Artie's been hard to get a hold of, and when Artie was going through the lowest of his lows, I reached out several times. None of his numbers work. I tried to get a hold of the guy that represents him, and I can't. I've been trying to. I'd love to have him on the air. I'd love to just not have him on the air, but talk to him as a friend and tell him I'm thinking about him and I'm proud of him. Artie and I were close, and I wish that I could keep in touch with Artie. It just seems like he's kind of, but maybe he needs to be bubbled up and not deal with some of his older friends that could potentially trigger him into doing some bad shit. I've never been into that scene, so to speak, but I have been part of some shady scenes, as you know, and maybe that's maybe Artie doesn't want anything to do with me. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mentioned, I love Artie and I love anything that he did on the show. And I mentioned the wedding because it did become a week long. You were calling in. Ronnie was a mess for Artie. Do you have a favorite moment from your time being part of the show? Was that the biggest time in your career to kind of be, in it? Because I think that was when and it also meant that Howard, obviously he came down to your wedding, so he obviously accepted you, but he accepted you on the air too, because he was having you on the air. Like, he accepted what you were doing on his channel, so it had to be like the greatest thing. But do you have another moment, or is that the one that would stick out for you, as the wedding and coming back and being able to?
Just that whole body of work, that those 4 or 5 years that we were together, where we worked Howard's afternoon drive show. Howard was mornings, we were afternoon. We were anointed and by Howard. We were kind of his little. We were kind of Howard's muscle, and the fact that, like, if Opie and Anthony would talk shit about Howard, Howard would just go, and then he knew that I would just be like, "You stupid fucking punks! Don't you ever talk about fucking Howard? If I see you in Sirius, I'm gonna whip your ass." And so we were kind of like Howard's little henchmen. Now, Howard never instructed us to do that, but we just are so loyal. I'm Midwestern like you are, and I'm just real loyal. Sometimes too loyal, but just that whole era was so special, and I didn't even really know how special it was. Wow. It's like you don't really appreciate what you're doing and how special a moment may be until it's long gone. And so I wish I would have been able just to really slow down and enjoy the moment. It's like, fuck, I am the afternoon drive guy on Howard 101. What the fuck? Maybe be a little more appreciative, maybe be a little more humble, maybe, do things a little bit differently, and so that I wouldn't have fucked it up.
Yeah. You had Brent was on your show. Brent then worked for Howard. Now he's doing his own thing. And what was his experience like going to Howard? Did you get a chance? I know you still talk to him, right? I think you and Brent are still pretty cool. Yeah. What was his?
Brent put a lot of the deal together. Brent did a lot. Brent was very familiar with Howard's world. Brent listened to Howard before he started with me. When Brent was in the military in the 90s and stuff, Howard was syndicated into LA and stuff like that, where Brent lived. And so Brent was very familiar with the show, from Cabby to all the Whack Pack and stuff. And so, I was only a little bit up to speed on Howard's world because I always had done mornings, opposite Howard. And so I wasn't as familiar with Howard's world as Brent was. So Brent, when we started working for Howard, Brent really would get me up to speed on some stuff that I kind of needed to know about, or was, kind of my liaison from representing my show over to Howard's world. So Brent was a huge asset and helped me kind of be accepted by Howard, probably even quicker than I was going to be.
I was doing research, and I see every time you call into Howard, he asks you about your friend Hulk Hogan. Can you still be friends? Is there ever a chance you guys reconcile? I did some research, and it doesn't sound like you guys are chatting. I would assume that's probably not going to happen. But do you someday think there's a chance that you and the Hulkster can become friends again?
I would hope. He was the godfather. He's the godfather of my son. Obviously, the situation that we went through, not all of the story has been properly told. The sexy story is that Bubba let Hogan life, and I tried to sell or distribute this tape when I didn't. There were other people that stole this tape. I am very regretful, and and the whole thing and the way it went down. He's truly, one of my very best friends in life. I would like nothing more than to apologize to him or have the opportunity to. We went through, 10 or 12 years of a really good friendship we were best friends, just best friends. I watched his kids grow up. I participated in a lot of part of his career. And, I was the person that would go in. Hogan is such a mega star that he kind of was a little freaked out when he would go to the surgeries, that people would take pictures of, his wiener and stuff like that. So for like the last 4 or 5 years of our friendships, any procedure I would go in the operating room with him and scrub up and have to sign all these forms. And I would be to kind of have his back. So I was very close to him. I'd love to have an opportunity for us to be friends again, but I understand where he probably, very mad at me. I could understand where his wife would be very upset with me. And so as a man, I understand that may never happen. I would love to apologize and for that not to be, but I do understand where that wouldn't happen.
Right. And then the irony of it is there's these guys that took the tapes from you. And then conversely, can you kind of be, all right, I forgive you, Spice Boy. I forgive you, Cowhead. No chance, right? So, I mean, is it weird? Like, you want Hulk to, I know it sounds weird, but you want Hulk to forgive you, but it's going to be hard to forgive those guys. So, you can understand where he's coming from, I guess.
Well, you know what? And it's hypocritical as that may seem, if you look at it this way, in the fact that what Terry, my wife and I participated in was nobody's business, would have never been seen by anybody. It was 3 consenting adults in an open relationship that was only our business, and nobody would have ever known. My surveillance system didn't captivate it to distribute it. It wasn't my mindset. Never has, never will. In fact, it ruined my life. Why would I ever sign up for anything that had happened? I am guilty of letting my wife fuck my best friend. That's not everybody's cup of tea. My moral compass has obviously changed tremendously since then. I was running hard back then. That's what fucking rock stars did, whatever. And maybe I was a little full of myself. That being said, that's what I'm guilty of. I'm not guilty of distributing this thing, not ever wanting to get out. It was never going to get out. I probably didn't responsibly secure it. But I've never had a theft problem in my building. For the 14, 15 years I had these guys work for me, I've never had so much as a, piece of gum taken. I never thought anybody would go into my office, inventory what I have and take this to destroy my life, which it did. Had that event not happened, or not been taped, or not have been stolen and distributed, my life would be far different right now, for the better.
Yeah, no, but it does. As you seem, completely balanced. I love that you seem kind of at peace with the world. I am curious about your relationship with Hulk, though, because you're a wrestling fan. I'm a wrestling fan. How did you guys are in Tampa? You're in Florida, and that's where he is. That's where you are. Does he just hear the show? How do you guys meet? And does he? I'm really curious. Did he tell you that he was going to be the third man of the NWO? Did you know him by that point?
Oh yeah. I was just kind of starting to hang out with him when the NWO stuff was going down. That was kind of our very first start of our friendship. And so I kind of saw all that kind of go down. I knew it was coming. Hogan had creative control. Hogan had a lot more with TNA to do with Turner and WCW than people even. Not only was he the number one talent, but he had all kinds of contract clauses where he had, right of refusal. He had creative control, the Bash of the Beach, that whole thing was because he has control of the finish. And so that was probably one of the most exciting times in with my friendship with Terry is the birth of the NWO. I don't know wrestling will ever be able to emulate that. I don't know that, as big as Cena got, as big as Vince's franchises are now with the Fox distribution and how sexy it is. I don't know that wrestling would ever be able to outdo the NWO era. I'm not talking about the latter part of NWO. I'm talking about the beginning of NWO, the first 3.
It's almost like when cable TV became something. Like you're never gonna, you're never going back to channels 2, 4, and 5. It's like out of the box. But we're talking about that. I'm curious then when he gets, the Vince Russo treatment and he walks out, does he call you like right away? Do you call him and go, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, Brad, I'm probably fucking up I just found it a couple of days ago. I was looking at my archives and I have the phone call. He called my show the next day after Bash on the Beach. And I probably should get that and put it up on YouTube or something because he fucking laid it all out. He laid it all out and said, I was on the phone and what he was most worried about is what Nick, he actually took Nick to that pay-per-view and Nick saw all this bullshit happening backstage and all, Jared laying down and Russo going out and cutting a shoot interview on him out there. When Russo went out there and that was a shoot. What Russo was saying was a fucking shoot. And so that's what he was most worried about. And when he ended up suing suing Russo and WCW and all that bullshit, that his son having to be exposed to all that was a lot of the lawsuit.
Do you go, oh, I regret doing this or I regret doing that? Or you go, no, yeah, that's how I made my business. What do you, if someone does say that, like myself saying, hey, do you have any regrets on some of the controversies of the...
Absolutely, Brad. I got a ton of regrets, and I wish I would have played a lot of things differently. I would be in a far better situation had I just settled down and been a little more patient and a little bit more. I don't know. To answer your question, yes, I regret a lot.